Because if we as international companies deploy this without acceptance from society at large, from all the stakeholders, then it doesn't stand a chance at all to be successful. So it starts with the social fabric. It starts with the fact that we would hope to be able to come up with pilots that prove that this is a responsible way to deal with the resilience question, that this is a responsible and sustainable way to look for new solutions. And the context is actually in the other four boxes, which is the stress, the interdependencies, the learning, and the ability of organizations to incorporate their the new realities for that matter. So all in all, this piece of work that we kickstarted is building on what we believe is reality, future stresses. What we believe is reality, urbanization. What we believe is reality, 9 billion people. What we believe is reality, in the increasing demand of energy and food and water. And it's acknowledging that if we continue in the traditional ways as we have, that you won't get to the outcomes that you desire. So you need to think of the new models. And we are convinced that within that, there's not a single entity that can resolve this on their own without collaboration, quite extensively and widely across all the sectors. With that, I'd like to open the floor for any questions or clarification.
Okay, thank you very much. Quite serious, isn't this? It'll get more, I think, when we get the panel too. Questions of clarification, or start with? Yes.
Alok, your reference to the agricultural landscape.
Can people hear in the back? If you're in the back and want to come up, it's there's plenty of places, and it's coffee up here too. Come on up.
Alok, your reference to the agricultural landscape not being fit for, the reference was that it was only suitable for agriculture. I think we have a thesis that all agricultural land anywhere in the world can still have a component of added natural component as a matrix built in as hedgerows, copses, whatever it is. And so the question I was wanting to ask Alok is that although that's the status quo now, could have part of your model, you refine that to currently agriculture, but could be agriculture as a production landscape and natural.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel. Excellent question or suggestion, I should actually say. And I would wholeheartedly support that. And I think that's part of knowledge and science and insights that you and other stakeholders who want to collaborate on this challenge could bring. Because there's, of course, nothing should be excluded. That's the fun thing almost about this. The one thing, as I said, I would only want to exclude is let's not go back and challenge whether there's a need for more food or a need for more water or a need for more energy. Because I think that will not get us to action. But suggestions, recommendations, improvements, nature-based solutions. As I said, we're actually, the notion of green infrastructure, and it's kind of seamless in line with the theme of the conference, nature-based solutions. We're increasingly excited. You can imagine we employ quite a number of engineers in our company who all of a sudden we're challenging and say, so you want to build a treatment facility, but have you looked at a wheat bed? And they kind of look at you and say, well, what do you think about? So you're really changing the paradigm here. It's a paradigm shift in how you approach and how you open up to other solutions, which collaboration by definition should bring in that respect.
Okay, any other question, comment at this stage? I just said one, and it was, I thought your attempt to sort of do a water accounting is very interesting. And obviously it opens up new thinking, and your examples were that too. Food's the other one. You haven't done a food accounting yet, have you? How much it takes to feed your workers or what have you? How many workers you have? Or
no,
it's not very stressful yet.
Well, no, I think there's a huge amount of stress regarding food production, and there's many developing thoughts about yield increase of crops and how to achieve that. For instance, Brazil is, by the way, one of the lowest yields you will find across the globe, I believe. So it has a huge opportunity to become much more efficient. And certainly, that is also the new thing about this. This is not oil industry working together with social stakeholders. This is oil industry working together with food producers. This is oil industry working together with IT folk. This is oil companies working together with infrastructure people, and that's what hopefully should come out.
And then the stress is, and each company has a different sort of stress matrix, I guess you could say. They have different issues, whether it's the food or the energy or the water. So if you were down here and the Unilever was up, they would then, as a food company, talk about the energy and the water issues that they have to face. And so that's the connection. Panel, would you like to come up, and I'll introduce you as you come up.
Okay.
Okay, let me see here. We've got already at the table is David Cunningham from Rio Tinto.
Peter.
And
Peter.
Peter, I'm not sorry, Peter from Cunningham, and I've been listening to for the last 2 days in interesting sessions, and I still got the name wrong. There were 3 Peters the other day, weren't there, on the panel? And Mark Weck from Dow Chemical, so we've got 2 other industries, and this is nice, we've mixed it up, and then 2 NGOs, Nigel Windsor from Earthwatch Institute, and Paul Engelberg, I never know how to say it.
Paul Engelberg is fine.
That's good, it's
Great, Frank.
And who's the deputy director here of IUCN, and he's got nothing else to do here, so we thought he'd stop by and give his views. Now, each of you gentlemen, if you could give a few minutes of your view on this topic, and I think the request from a lot is, how do we work together and deal with this issue? It's not so much is this an issue, but where do we go with it and how do we tackle it? Do you want to start?
Sure, I'd be delighted to. So we're going to use the.
I don't think we need this soundboard. I think that one works.
Okay, so by way of introduction, my name is Mark Weck. I've worked for 30 years with the Dow Chemical Company in a variety of research and environmental and business leadership roles, and now I'm privileged to direct sustainability programs for the company. So that's the perspective that I give. A lot of what Allard said is what we also agree upon as well. First off, we accept that there's a problem. 9 billion people, more energy, more food, certainly more water needed, no doubt about that. We want to face reality as it will be, and as it is increasingly today. So that's a foundation for the way that we look at the situation. And I think we can all agree on those issues and those problems, as opposed to putting our heads in the sand, so to speak, and believing that those problems will somehow go away. The second thing that I would echo is Allard's call for collaboration and cooperation across a variety of sectors. No one has all the answers. Not us in industry, not people in academia, not people in governments, and not people in NGOs. We all have something very strong to contribute, though, and need to be working together with increased urgency on these kinds of issues. I very much applaud the work in terms of water for energy. I think that's very important work that needs to be done increasingly, and more specifically to understand the kinds of interfaces between water and energy and food. Relative to resilience, applaud the initiative to start thinking about this as a resiliency issue, because we're going to have a lot of transitions that we're going to need to face together as society over the next century. And those transitions will not be easy, they will be difficult, and they will be fraught with shocks that we will have, because it won't be a smooth, continuous transition that we'll have to make. There'll be shocks that will be global, there'll be shocks that will be regional, there'll be shocks that are local. And the resiliency of our systems to provide water, to provide energy, to provide food, to provide a livable society is going to be increasingly important. So we need not to be working so much with averages as we need to be working with the overall variability and resilience of the systems in which we're operating. That's going to be particularly difficult as we deal with ecosystems. Some of our ecosystems are very resilient, but of course, as most of us know, ecosystems have been in decline and their resilience has been in decline. And that becomes an increasing concern where we could have fragile systems that won't break on average, but will break in a shock situation. One of the keys, as far as we're concerned, to dealing with that appropriately is making sure that we're valuing those ecosystems in a way that we haven't done before, and valuing the ecosystem services that are provided to us, because of course food is an ecosystem service, water in many ways, fresh water, the flows, the quality, the way that it's provided is indeed an ecosystem service as well under most situations. And we need to make sure that we're taking into account as a society the true costs of those things, as opposed to letting them simply be externalities in the common good where they're not managed very well. Those would be some of the first reflections that I would have on Allard's comments. Thank you, Claire.
Excellent. Nigel?
Thanks. Firstly, just to say how pleased I am to be invited to this discussion. I've had the privilege to work with Shell for much of my life as both a scientist and as an environmentalist. And in working with that community, we've seen how within the Shell structure, there are leaders who want to bring about change. I think the nexus that we're talking about today fits into the holistic approach that we must all take in trying to understand the landscape. As a geographer, all my life we've been looking at interdisciplinary approaches to put together, if you like, everything from the A to Z of a landscape. You need to understand its water, its soils, its geomorphology, its geology, its life sciences, and its social sciences, and you cannot see any of that in isolation. So although we're talking about water, food, energy, actually it's within the whole holistic approach you need to take. That's why I like what's happening at this conference is a lot of discussion about resilience of landscapes, which in my old term is river basins. So early days of spending many years in the field trying to understand river basins and what happens when bits get cut down at the bottom and biofuels are grown on at the top or the other way around has a huge impact to everything in that river system. And trying to understand that is not something that can be done in a overnight. It has to be part of a long-term study, and that's why there needs to be close collaboration between the model used to be for sustainable development thinking. You needed trusted dialogue between local communities on the ground, the science communities, those who are collecting information, the corporate communities who are working in that area, and then decision makers who are making overall decisions for long-term management of those areas. And if there isn't trusted dialogue between all those four, it's very difficult to find the balance in going forward. So the challenge we have today is, do we really understand what we mean by this nexus? And can we articulate that amongst those communities? So would David Cameron, for instance, understand what we're talking about today in taking this forward? Does the head of other big corporations, do they understand these issues? And do they really understand not only the complexity, but how their company is connected to the impact of what they do around the world? My final point is that I think that we cannot find solutions to this without help from industry. The innovation that's coming into the world, particularly the new technologies. One of the best impacts of new technologies has been to reduce the amount of people flying around the world because of video conferencing. That has been a huge impact. In the world of Shell, I see opportunities for them to engage the public on their forecourts, so everyone who goes in to buy petrol can learn more about these issues and can be informed in terms of how we're all in this together. I like to think that actually in 5 years' time, the companies that are leading and are sustainable are the ones that are informing the great public. And that, at the end of the day, is informing the great public to change the way what they do, what they say, what they buy, what they eat, and what they vote. So we're all in this together. Thanks.
Interesting. Peter.
Thanks very much. Peter Cunningham's the Global Head of Health, Safety, Environment and Communities at Rio Tinto. I think it's interesting for me as I look back on my sort of 20 years with Rio Tinto and understand, the trajectory of change that we have seen as a sort of almost an interesting dynamic for thinking forward. I mean, I think a lot of the issues that we've dealt with have tended to be within our footprint. So they've tended to be those issues, social, environmental issues, that have been directly or indirectly connected with our operations. And that meant that in many ways we've worked progressively, got better at managing those issues. But it's been more issues, endogenous issues to our operations that we've had to deal with. And it's very interesting now as I look sort of forward and you talk about the nexus and you think about the fact that, suddenly I think the sort of areas in which we operate, which in mining is often in frontier regions, you need sort of stability and you need access to resources to actually extract product to take it to market. And there's sort of pressures that I think the nexus that we're talking about here around energy, food and water starts to come together. And I think, I know Alan said it, but I mean, climate change adds an extra dimension to that. So you're adding an extra dimension of volatility into your overall sort of business context, which is something that I think is a new challenge to the corporate sector as it is to society in general. So what does that mean? On the one hand, I think it is more of the same. I mean, we've got to keep getting better at resource management and keep thinking that through. And I look at the work we've done around water and the increasing maturity with which we think about measuring catchment areas and understanding real engagement with communities about water usage as a sort of a real framework for how we take that forward and put together our water management strategies locally. So on one hand, there's that part of it, but on the other hand, I think we are entering into a new era, and I think there's sort of fundamental to that is the whole innovation. I think part of that's the hardware. How do we actually do things? How do we engineer our assets? How do we actually change our thinking in some instances? And we have a program called Mine of the Future, which is very much thinking how as you take mining forward, you rethink some of the dimensions. I think the other thing is some of the software. How we actually run the business and engage around the processes. And the last few days we've been talking about some of the work we've been doing around biodiversity and that positive impact as being part of that sort of process. And finally, I just would echo, I think part of this sort of game is also that no one has the solution, so you have to be thinking about partnerships, have to be thinking about engagement, and have to be thinking about engagement with people who think differently on these issues, because it's the sum of different views that I think start to come together to give you sort of solutions. I'll maybe end up.
Okay. Paul? Thanks. I can't reach that one, so I'll stand if it's all right, and I hope you can hear me. I'm sure you can. First, IUCN is not an NGO, even if both Alan and Frank told us. So we're not, but we're an international organization that also has governments and NGOs as members. But never mind, we are happy to be part of civil society and part of society, which we are also happy for partnering with Shell as we've done. The good thing about the presentation that Alan gave, and Peter referred to it very explicitly, is that these issues are taken out of the corporate social responsibility aspect. I mean, they're looked at much more broadly and as clearly issues for business. Alan talks about mainstreaming environment. I want to get back to that, but it's very good that we see companies addressing these issues as at the real strategic business level. At the same time, I'm confused when I listen to Alan's presentation, and also when I read your scenario papers, because what level are we actually talking about? At some stage, you're talking global level, right? You're talking about 9 billion people coming up, and you're talking about the demand for food and the energy and water and so on, and the imbalances there. Great. But then there's a tremendous jump to the corporate level. And then you start talking about investments at that level and how Shell is operating. Fair enough, you have to do that, and your company bosses have to do that. But what do we do with the link between these two levels? What is happening there, and how do we address these links? Because even if we get all the, no, that will take time, but even if we get the companies in the world to address these issues of resource answers in the way that you're presenting, we're not going to avoid the balance problems and the boundary problems that we are facing in the world. So we need something additional. It's not enough to have an analysis of these global imbalances and then to say we need to take care of water in our company decisions. And I can't quite find out where it is and what we need to do in between, but perhaps I'll take one more step. Second point, the other day, I lost track of days now, but when your boss or one of your colleagues, Marvin was in the panel, he said that Shell is now putting a price on carbon, $40 a ton, and then he was asked by Jack Dale from Guyana, the president, very good question, saying, okay, what do you do with that $40? Do you put it somewhere or give it somebody? And Marvin was honest and said, no, this is for our own internal calculation. So I can ask you now, Ellen, what are you doing with your very good analysis of water requirements? Are you putting a price on that? And are you putting the money for that allocation somewhere? Or how do you actually start paying for that ecosystem service? Is that looked at only in terms of determining where does Shell invest because you can see that there is a resource issue coming up? Or is it also in a broad